A lion has taken his place at the mouth of your den. Not a story painted on a wall you passed as a child and never looked at twice. Not a mascot stitched onto a banner in a building you visit once a week and forget by Wednesday. Not a memory you can barely place anymore. Faded at the edges like a photograph left in a sunny window too long. A living weight, muscle, mane, breath, positioned exactly between you and the mouths that have been circling closer than you have told anyone. Before these words are finished, I will bring you back to a night when a king could not sleep, because a friend of his had been sealed inside a den of hungry lions and was found completely unharmed by morning. I want you to feel that same weight settle into the doorway you have been guarding alone, right now, while you listen, as these words are still forming around you. I see you. The parent who checks the lock twice before finally sitting down is not imagining the danger. The one rehearsing a phone call before daring to make it. I have heard every draft, every version that never got said out loud, every sentence you deleted and started over 3 times. There is a name you keep repeating under your breath, like a password, against whatever is circling closest to you right now. The friend stopped asking months ago how you were managing the noise, and you let the question drop because answering it honestly felt like too much to hand someone over coffee. Your prayers have gotten shorter, sharper, more like flares sent up in the dark than letters written slow at a table. None of it is hidden from me. The mother rehearsing the worst version of a diagnosis before the doctor even calls back. I know the exact shape of that fear because I have been standing closer to you in that waiting room than the chair beside you, closer than the magazine you were pretending to read. The man walking to the mailbox, already flinching at what might be inside it, bracing before his hand even touches the metal door. The teenager glancing over her shoulder in a parking lot she has walked 100 times. Keys laced between her fingers the way someone taught her, without ever explaining why it should feel necessary. The one lying still, with her eyes open, running the numbers on a debt that keeps multiplying no matter how the math is done. No matter how many times she starts the calculation, over hoping for a different total. The business owner who rehearses the closing conversation with a client he already suspects will say no. Practicing his own composure in the mirror of the elevator before the doors open. I have watched every one of these mouths circling you, and I have not once looked away. Not for a single one of them. Not even the ones you have never said out loud to anyone. Fear rarely walks into the open, where you could finally name it and see how small it actually is next to me. It moves the way something moves through a thicket, snapping just enough branches to keep you listening, never showing itself fully, never letting you get close enough to measure it against anything real. That is how it prowls. At the edge of what you can see, never in the clear, because the moment you saw it plainly, you would notice how much smaller it is than the lion, standing between you and it. The widow who now walks herself to the car alone and counts the steps across the parking garage to keep her mind from wandering toward what could go wrong. The new employee rehearsing a defense for a mistake nobody has even mentioned yet. The father who says he is fine 3 times in a row until the 3rd time comes out thinner than the first. I could keep naming them. I know everyone by more than a face. The one who lets calls from unknown numbers go straight to voicemail, because the last few unexpected calls all carried bad news. The student staring at a results page, refreshing the same screen over and over, as if refreshing faster could change what is already decided. The one scrolling through headline after headline, long past, when they meant to stop, absorbing danger that has nothing to do with the actual room they are sitting in, until worry about everything starts to feel indistinguishable from worry about anything specific at all. Maybe none of those describe you exactly, and that is fine too. Fear rarely announces itself using the same words twice. But if you have felt something circling lately, vague, persistent, impossible to point at directly, trust that feeling more than you trust your own quick dismissal of it. I built you to notice danger. I never built you to face it down using only your own strength. Right now, before you read another line, pull one breath in slow through your nose. Let it leave through your open mouth, longer than it came in, like something loosening its grip on you a little at a time. Do that once more, at your own pace, not mine. You are not performing calm for anyone watching. You are practicing what it actually feels like to stand this close to me. Here is the truth underneath the noise, and I need you to hear it plainly. Not as a slogan, but as something you can lean your whole weight against. You do not have to be the lion. You were never asked to be the lion. You only have to lie down behind him. Now let me say something plainly, because it changes everything that comes after it. The king you picture when you say, "My name was probably drawn a long time ago," robes, a gavel, a throne set too high to reach, arms folded, while someone told you to prove yourself worthy of a rescue that might or might not arrive, depending on how well you performed. Somebody handed you that portrait early, maybe before you were old enough to question it, and you have been squinting at it ever since, wondering why the distance between you and me never seems to close, no matter how carefully you behave. That is not a portrait I painted. That king is not who I am, and it never has been. Not for one single day. I am not the far-off judge who waits to see if you can clear the den on your own before deciding whether you deserve help. I am not keeping score of how many times you had to be rescued before deciding you have used up your quota. I am the one who was already crouched low at the entrance before you even knew there was a threat worth naming, long before the danger had a shape you could point to. A lion does not pace behind a desk reviewing your file. A lion does not require a form, filled out in triplicate, before he decides to move on your behalf. He plants his feet in the doorway, and he does not consult anyone about whether you are worth defending. He simply stands there because you are his, and that settles the matter before it is even raised. Notice for a moment whether your jaw has been braced like it's holding back a growl of its own, the one you have been swallowing every time you smiled through something that actually terrified you underneath. If it has, let it fall open, just slightly, without forcing it. You do not have to guard your own face like a fortress, while a lion is already holding the doorway for you, whether you noticed him there or not. Even in a valley cut so deep the light barely reaches the floor of it, you were never told to fear the things that live down there, because I go through it with you. Not behind you where you'd have to keep looking back to check. Not somewhere ahead out of sight. Beside you. Close enough to touch. Close enough that you could reach out a hand in the dark and find mine already there. My spirit was never meant to be a force you had to summon. He is a companion who leads you, of all places, toward rest. Real rest. The kind that does not evaporate the moment your circumstances change again. Here is where the picture starts to change. There's a difference between a watchman you hire and a lion who claims you as his own. A hired watchman works a shift. He clocks in when danger is scheduled and clocks out the moment his hours are done, whether the threat has passed or not. He watches from a comfortable distance so the paperwork stays clean and nobody on his side of the fence gets hurt. He can be reassigned. He can quit. He can decide the pay is not worth the risk and walk away without ever telling you. You may have spent years trying to be your own hired watchman, working shifts nobody assigned you, calculating risk long after everyone else in your life has stopped worrying about the same thing. Because at some point, you quietly decided safety was a duty only you could be trusted to carry out correctly. That duty was never actually yours to keep. A lion does not do shifts. He does not watch from a distance, calculating exposure. His own body becomes the wall between you and whatever is circling. That is the real difference between being protected and being guarded. Protected is a policy written by someone who has never met you and never will. Guarded is a person standing in the gap with his own skin, his own weight, his own refusal to move. The version of me some of you inherited was quiet, the way a locked door is quiet. Not peace, just absence with the lights off. You learned to read my silence as disapproval, my delay as disinterest, my distance as a verdict already handed down on whether you had earned the right to be safe. But a lion does not calculate whether you have earned his protection before he offers it. A father does not check his child's report card before he runs toward the sound of a scream coming from the backyard. I have never once been the king with folded arms, watching from a balcony to see how you'd manage. I have always been the one already moving toward the noise before anyone thought to call for help. There is a version of this fear that shows up dressed as other people's opinions instead of teeth. The envy in a coworker's voice when something in your life finally steadies after a long stretch of not steadying. The quiet mockery from someone who has decided your faith is naive because it has not yet been tested the way theirs has. That too is a mouth circling the den. It does not get let in either, no matter how close it prowls. You do not owe it an explanation, and you were never asked to silence it yourself with the right comeback at the right moment. The lion is already standing guard at that doorway too, the one protecting your peace from opinions dressed up as concern. There is a kind of steadiness I give that will not make sense to everyone watching you carry it. While a whole room reacts with panic, you may find yourself oddly, almost embarrassingly calm. Not because the news got smaller or the numbers changed, but because the lion at your door has never once needed to raise his voice to be believed. He does not prove his strength by roaring at every shadow that moves near the den. Real strength rarely needs volume, and it almost never needs an audience. You may have learned early to equate loudness with power. The loudest argument wins. The loudest fear must be the truest one. The loudest prayer must be the one that finally gets heard. But a lion who has already claimed his ground does not need to convince anyone of anything by shouting. He simply stays. Staying over and over through every ordinary day, nothing dramatic happens, is its own kind of proof. Quieter than a roar, but far harder to fake. This is not measured by what your eyes can currently count stacked in front of you. The mouths you can see circling are not the only truth in the room, and neither is the fear they are producing in your chest right now, real as it feels. There is a presence. Your eyes were never built to measure directly, doing more in the space you cannot see than every visible thing that has been circling could ever account for on its own. I want to read you a sentence I had written down for you a very long time ago. Long before you were the age you are now. Long before this particular fear had a name. It was not written for theologians studying it under a lamp. It was written for the tired one, the one checking locks, the one rehearsing a defense nobody has asked for yet. Let me tell you first the story it came out of, because the sentence means almost nothing without the night that produced it. I want to tell you about a night I have never stopped being proud of. There was a man named Daniel, known for praying with his window open, the way he always had for years, without hiding it from anyone. Men who resented how close he stood to me convinced a king to sign a law that made that simple habit a crime worth his life. The king respected him and did not want to sign it. But the law was sealed with a royal ring, and by evening he was lowered into a den of lions. A stone rolled over the mouth of it, wax pressed with a seal, so no one could claim later it had been tampered with in the dark. The king could not eat that night. He could not be entertained by anything his own palace offered him. Not music, not food, not the company that usually filled his halls. He walked those halls half the dark hours through, alone with the decision he had regretted the moment the seal touched the wax. And at the very first hint of light, he ran, not walked, ran to the mouth of the den and called down into it, his voice cracking on the first word, asking whether the God his friend served every single day had somehow been able to save him from the lions after all, against every reasonable expectation. And from inside the den, a living voice answered back, calm, steady, entirely unrushed. This is what that voice said. Daniel, chapter 6, verse 22. My God sent his angel and shut the lions' mouths, and they have not harmed me, because I was found blameless before him, and also before you, O king. I have done no harm. Read it slowly with me, because every clause in that sentence is doing something on purpose. My God sent his angel. Not his own courage, not his own quick thinking under pressure, not some clever trick used to distract a room full of hungry, real, teeth and claw animals that had not been fed in days for exactly this reason. Sent, dispatched. On purpose, before the trouble ever fully began, before the stone was even in place. Shut the lions' mouths, not tamed them into something friendlier, not sedated them, not simply hoped they had already eaten earlier that same day and would leave the rest for morning. Shut. A deliberate act by a hand stronger than instinct, stronger than hunger, stronger than the nature those animals had never once had a reason to resist before. They have not harmed me. Present tense, still true when the sun came up over the palace walls. Still true while he dusted himself off and climbed out into the morning air on his own 2 feet, unassisted, unafraid. He did not fight a single lion that night. He did not wrestle. He did not out-clever them. He rested, or came close enough to it, while the very thing that should have ended him lay quiet at his feet the entire dark hours through, as if it, too, had been given different instructions. Because I was found blameless before him, not sinless in some impossible superhuman way no ordinary person could reach, but faithful in the small, unglamorous sense. A man who kept praying with his window open, even when it began to cost him something, day after day, long before there was ever a den involved in the story at all. And also before you, O king, I have done no harm. Notice what he did not do with his one moment of vindication. He did not spend it settling a score with the men who had engineered his death. He simply told the truth once, plainly, and let the silence of an empty den do the rest of the talking for him. Long before that den, I spoke a blessing over a man named Judah, calling him a lion's cub, crouched low, ready, the kind that nobody in his right mind dares rouse from where he rests. That line was never only about one tribe wandering a dusty stretch of land thousands of years before you were born. It pointed forward toward a son who would one day stand exactly where those lions once stood, at the mouth of a sealed tomb, guarding nothing left to protect, but rising out of it anyway, so that the stone rolled away on that particular morning could mean what the stone rolled over the den once meant. Nothing that looked final was ever actually final, no matter how convincing the seal appeared from the outside. My word says elsewhere that the righteous are as bold as a lion, not because courage was manufactured somewhere in their own chest through sheer effort or gritted teeth, but because they finally believed someone stronger was standing beside them the whole time. and had been the whole time, whether they had noticed him there or not. That word, in the older language of that blessing, is sometimes translated whelp, a lion's whelp, a cub not yet grown into the fullness of what he would become, but already unmistakably a lion, already carrying the shape of what was coming. I am telling you this because you may feel more like the whelp than the fully grown lion most days, unfinished, still learning what it means to trust the one standing over you. That is allowed. The man in that den was fully grown, with decades of faithfulness behind him, and he still spent an entire night in the dark, not knowing for certain how the story would end. Trust was not the absence of that not knowing. It was choosing rest inside it anyway. I do not point you back to an empty den only. I point you to an empty tomb, because the same power that shut the mouths of those lions is the power that walked out of a grave 3 days after the world assumed the story was finished. That is not a metaphor either. A stone was rolled in front of that tomb too, and sealed, and guarded by men whose entire task was making sure nothing could move it from the inside. It moved anyway. I am not telling you no obstacle will ever appear in your path again. That would not be true. And I have already told you, I would rather be honest with you than easy with you. I am telling you that the same presence who shut those lions' mouths and rose from that tomb is the guard standing at your door right now. And history has already shown you what happens to stones and seals and locked mouths when he decides to move. Go back to the doorway I described when this message began. A lion has taken his place at the mouth of your den. That is not poetry, and it was never meant as decoration for a difficult week. That is what happened in that den, and it is what I'm telling you is happening right now, around whatever you have been circling in your own mind. Awake, counting exits, rehearsing arguments nobody has actually started, checking locks a third time before you can finally sit down and breathe. The mouths have not gone quiet because you finally became brave enough on your own. They have gone quiet because he took up that post in the doorway and has refused to move ever since, through every version of the night you have lived through so far. I need to be honest with you about something I am not promising, because I would rather tell you the truth than something that sounds better today and falls apart the first time your life gets hard again. I am not telling you every debt clears by a date you can circle on a calendar, or that everyone who has mocked your faith will apologize by name, or that every set of results will always read the way you have been praying they read. Anyone who tells you peace is a receipt for a specific outcome, delivered exactly on schedule, guaranteed and dated, is not describing the peace I actually give. What I am promising is steadier than that, and honestly, it is harder to fake. The mouths circling you do not get the final say over your life, because a lion far stronger than every single one of them has already stood his ground between you and them, and he has not once left his post to go check on something more urgent. The freedom I am describing was never about never facing a hard due date again. It is freedom from carrying that due date alone, teeth bared at it in an empty room with no one standing beside you. The thing that used to terrify you most, the one you quietly built your whole schedule around avoiding, will eventually look smaller next to what I am showing you now. Not because it shrank on its own and not on a date you can circle, but because your eyes are finally adjusting to see it standing next to a lion instead of standing alone in the middle of an empty room. Fear grows in isolation. It rarely survives being seen next to the right comparison. There is something worth saying out loud in the middle of all this, not as a performance for anyone else, but because gratitude tends to loosen a grip that fear has been tightening for a long time. You do not have to wait for the circling to stop completely before you thank me for the doorway already held. Open your mouth now, in whatever plain words you actually have, not for what has not happened yet, but for the guard who has not moved from his post through any of it. If the growl has been louder than my voice for you lately, say so. Not to prove anything to anyone reading these comments, just one word, right where you are. Guarded. Then keep listening, because I still have something practical for your hands, not only for your heart. So hear this again, because it is the whole of what I came to say to you today. And I would rather you remember this than every other sentence in this message. You do not have to be the lion. You only have to lie down behind him. So here is something small you can carry with you into the rest of your week. Something for your hands, not only your heart. The next time you feel that particular growl rise in your chest, the one that makes you check the lock a third time, or rehearse the same argument again in the shower, or run bad news through your mind on a loop until it wears a groove there, place one hand flat against the center of your chest. Just there, nowhere else. Say, quietly, one word out loud or under your breath. Guarded. Not as a spell that fixes the outcome on command. Not as a formula that guarantees the diagnosis, the debt, or the difficult conversation resolves the way you want it to. As a plain fact you are choosing to remember on purpose, the way it must have been remembered long before the first hint of morning ever reached the mouth of that den, in the hours when there was no proof yet, only a presence. If you want a second small thing to carry, write the word somewhere you will actually see it. The edge of a mirror, the lock screen of the phone you keep checking anyway, a scrap of paper folded into a wallet. Not to decorate your space. To interrupt the loop the next time it starts, so your eyes catch the word before the growl gets loud enough to drown it out entirely. And if someone you love is circled by their own lions right now, a parent, a child, a friend who calls you at strange hours just to hear a steady voice, you do not have to become their lion either. You are not appointed to guard every doorway and every life around you. That was never a role given to human shoulders. What you can do is point them toward the same doorway you are learning to trust. Tell them plainly that a guard has already stepped into that doorway too. And let that be enough some days, even when you cannot fix what is circling them. You may not feel any different the first time you try this, or the fifth. The lions in your life rarely leave the moment you say a word. That was true even for the man who spent an entire night in that den before the stone was ever rolled away for him by someone else's hands. But somewhere around the 10th time, or the 30th, something in you starts to actually believe what your own mouth has been saying. Not because the threat vanished into thin air on command, because you finally noticed who has been standing in the doorway the whole time, long before you thought to look up and check. Guarded does not mean numb. You will probably still hear the growl on certain days. Your hands may still shake a little, reaching for a phone that rings at an unexpected moment. The difference is not that the fear vanishes completely and never visits again. It's that it no longer gets to decide where you actually stand, or whether you are safe enough to breathe. There is something almost impossible to explain about the particular kind of rest I am describing. The same den that could have destroyed a man became, for one long night, a strange and unlikely place of peace. Not because the danger left the room, but because the right guard never did. I lead people toward rest in places that would make no sense to anyone watching from the outside. Not away from the difficulty. Through the middle of it, with my hand close enough to touch the whole way. Some of you have spent years trying to be brave enough to face down everything circling you completely alone. Treating rest like a weakness you cannot afford. Treating your own exhaustion as proof of devotion. Consider this instead, slowly, without rushing past it. The strongest thing you can do most days is not to fight harder than the thing frightening you. It is to lie down where the lion has already made his stand. And let that be the actual reason your shoulders finally drop. That is not surrender. That is not giving up on the fight. That is where he slept, undisturbed, in a place built to end him. And if the fear tries to tell you that resting looks like carelessness, remember, Proverbs said it plainly long before you were born. The wicked flee when no one is even chasing them, worn out from running from shadows of their own making, while the righteous are as bold as a lion who has nowhere urgent to be. Boldness, it turns out, is not the absence of a threat. It is the presence of a guard you have finally stopped trying to replace with your own strength. You spent a long time auditioning for a position that was already filled. You can stop auditioning now. The lion is not waiting for you to earn the doorway. He is not tired. He does not take shifts. He has already planted his feet between you and every mouth that has been circling. You are not unguarded. You have not been unguarded for a single hour of this, not one. Amen. Before you go, I left something small in the pinned comment, a few lines written for the next time the growl in your own chest gets louder than anything anyone is actually saying to you out loud. And if a face came to mind while you were reading this, someone who could use a lion standing at their door too,